let's go to another way of transitioning, which is to use the railways. Now, rail travel has come and gone in and out of vogue, really, over the decades, over the centuries even. And certainly, I think with low-cost airlines in the 1990s, and I think we'll talk about this a little, it did undermine the railway system quite a lot. That led to a lack of investment in rail, which led it to really, in a sense, fall in popularity, and also it just wasn't available, and it was expensive. Now, some countries today are, I think, doing it pretty well. There are some very good high-speed rail routes in Spain and in France. In particular, I think I know this, that the Barcelona to Madrid route by rail is taken up by 70% of all traffic from between those two cities, which is a very good thing. And there are estimates that using rail is 40 times more carbon efficient or more eco-friendly than most other forms of transport. Today we have nearly 10,000 kilometers of high-speed rail in Europe. But the question is, do we have the capacity, do we have the infrastructure, and can we afford the prices that are involved in taking a rail journey in order for it to replace aviation more in the future? In some countries, we could do it. In other countries, including my own, we have big issues with rail, and it's going to take some time to get through that. Just anecdotally, I took a night jet service from Venice to Vienna quite recently. It's a lovely, romantic trip in the sense that it's lovely, it's going through nighttime, you're staying in a bunk. We travelled about 380 kilometres in 11 hours, so not necessarily the most efficient way of travelling, but these trains are, by design, slow. My biggest worry, actually, was frankly falling. I was in a sleeper bunk thing, and I was in a bunk, top bunk. My biggest worry was falling off. Actually, I don't know if you've ever been in one of these, but I had to be harnessed in. I had to use a harness and a strap to make sure I didn't actually fall off. But that's just part of the allure and the romance of rail, isn't it? But let's talk about that romance. Let's talk about how rail is coming back and how we can make it much more accessible to all, and what is the future in terms of it replacing other more damaging forms of transport. So to do that, can I please welcome my panel on this? Can we please ask on stage to have Florencia Allo Moreno, General Manager Western Europe for Intrepid, who are a big backer of rail travel. Welcome. Also, can I bring on Valentine Camusot, who is General Manager Europe of Rail Europe. And last but not least, Claire Hanney. You've seen her before, Managing Director of the Travel Corporation. And I'm just going to say very quickly, I have actually replaced Ian Taylor from Travel Weekly, who was going to be doing this, and he's had to withdraw because of family issues, and we wish him the best. Some of us know him, and we wish him all the best. Okay. First of all, let's go through with each of you. Explain your own business and company involvement with rail travel. I'm going to start with you, Valentine, as the most obvious person to start here. So tell me.
Yes, the name of the company, Rail Europe, I think it sounds great. So Rail Europe, we are a rail aggregator. So we offer to our customer a single platform to easily book train tickets in Europe. We have two distribution channels, B2C and B2B. Our customers are coming from everywhere in the world, overseas and also Europe. Myself, I'm in charge of Europe customers, B2B customers. We are working with travel agencies, tour operators, GDS, TMC, SBT, but also some startups who are building application. And we offer them different solutions to have this access to the rail content. So we have an API, a booking engine. We have a white label solution as well. And so our goal is to make train booking easy. So they can easily compare the different offer in a single country. So for instance, in Spain, they can compare Irio with Renfe and with Wigo. And they can also easily combine different offers. So if they want to combine Eurostar with LNER or DB with SBB and Trenitalia, then they don't have to think about the name of the carrier. They just have to say, I want to travel between Firenze to Berlin, and then our system will give them the best offer depending on the carriers and on the timetable.
And can you back up the assertion that more people are turning to rail these days?
Yes, so for different reasons. So the first reason is that people are looking for greener mode of transportation. So this is obvious. And the second thing is that with the competition that is arising, there are more and more frequency on trains. And this is what we observed, for instance, in Italy. It's been now 12 years that Italo is competing with Trenitalia there, and we saw that the frequencies has doubled. Same in Spain. This is what you said in your introduction. And frequency is doubled where the price are decreasing. For instance, in Italy, the price decreased by 40% when Italo started to operate there. Hopefully it will be the same in France. Now Trenitalia and Renfe are running. Same also in the Benelux, where there are a lot of changes. So I think that it will help definitely for the prices. And trains are getting more and more comfortable because of this. So National Railway have to change their mind and their materials and everything.
Okay. Claire, from your perspective, customers, are they interested in rail again?
Yes, but I don't think they were ever not interested in rail from our perspective, in terms that there are two real ways that we incorporate rail into our products. We either have standalone rail journeys, or we have rail as a portion of a full tour, if you like. And I think the massive thing that's changed from our perspective is we never saw rail as a sustainable form of travel. It was a romantic and beautiful way of travel, and it was something that we incorporated into tours in places like Switzerland, for example, where the rail journeys are majestic, in places like South Africa, in places like Australia, and where you could have back in the day in Russia, the Trans-Siberian. We incorporated rail from the beauty of it, but it certainly wasn't a sustainability concept. In the past few years, we've shifted that thinking from how can we use rail as a draw card, if you like, to bring in guests, but also how can we use rail now to be able to lower our carbon footprint? And that's really required a hell of a lot of work, I can tell you. So, for example, with our Switzerland tour, this is kind of embarrassing to say out loud, but I'm going to tell you all anyway. We used to...
Spit it out, Claire.
Just amongst us friends, hey? No journalists in the room, yeah? So we used to, seriously, we would do rail travel around Switzerland, and we would have a full-size coach follow the train around with the luggage and pick up our guests at the other side and take them around the cities and stuff. And that was what was required to give the level of service. But that's also because there weren't the additional services available in the cities to be able... So we weren't being sustainable because we had both the coach and the train booked. And we did this a lot, right?
Claire, if I may, we have a service for door-to-door luggage.
I know that now. Thank you very much. And that's desperately needed. But we've shifted
you
to
should
use...
work together, collaboration.
We already do.
You already do.
But seriously, it wasn't until the last few years that sort of thing was available, and it meant that we were able to shift our thinking from rail travel being a romantic addition and additional cost to our guests to be able to... So when I started working with Swiss tourism a number of years ago, they were looking at how to make Switzerland a more sustainable place. And I started with the rail journey. And they've got a thing called Swisstainable. I'm not sure if you've heard about trying to be able to bring everyone onto the same sustainable platform. So we wanted to create the first Swisstainable tour. In order to do that, we had to pull our Swiss product offering apart. And that's when I realised how many additional services were being used as well as the train that made it actually an unsustainable tour offering. So pulling all that apart, partnering with you to be able to use the luggage services, it's meant that not only have our costs come down in Switzerland on our product, but also the sustainability has improved exponentially, and our the quality of the offering has improved as well. So it took a lot of time and a lot of work with a lot of different partners, and the volumes we carry are quite large. You know, we're talking outside. The volumes I carry on that tour in Switzerland are about the same as you carry across Europe. So it's we've got a lot of people that we carry on trains. At the same time, our limiting factor, availability.
Yeah, and we'll come to that.
For sure.
There is also an issue in terms of the difference between leisure, obviously, which is most of your market, and business travel. And they are very different animals, and we will distinguish between them as we go along. Florencia, from your perspective, how much has there been uptake in rail with Intrepid customers?
So from our side, adding to what Claire was actually saying, train travel...
A bit closer, yeah.
You hear me over there?
Yeah.
So train travel hasn't been something that we started doing now. It's been something that we've been doing for many years. So we definitely see that interest in customers. And for us, in particular in West Europe, literally all of our products, with the exception of one, is all done by train travel or other type of land transportation. So definitely there is a pickup for this. We definitely see the interest. It's not new. We've been doing this for quite a long time. Actually, in 2013, we launched a very innovative trip, which was from Madrid to Marrakesh, done by train. And that is nowadays one of our star products, one of our top products in West Europe. So definitely there is an interest, and we see that people love it. And when you look into our customer feedback and how much affordable those trips are for our business, these trips are on the top line of our product. And we are talking about very successful feedback that we receive from the customers. So from our perspective, it is working. And even if maybe companies like, obviously, Claire and myself, we can say that it's working, we love it personally and from a business perspective, maybe not everyone is on board yet, but eventually they will be on board.
Literally.
Because the government is pushing for that. There is a demand for slow travel. There's so many benefits on why train travel is really much better than any other way of traveling, especially when you are coming from countries as North America or Australia. You know, you want to be able to see places in a much slower pace and actually seeing the way as locals see it as well. So much more an immersive experience. So definitely pick up for that. And
part of the evidence, I think, from your perspective, is that you've got 40 new itineraries, 40 new rail trips. Yeah. So in fact, we recently launched this year a rail theme. We basically have themes for our tours. And we launched this theme where we included 40 out of our 1,000 trips that we have across the company. But these 40 trips are not the only trips that we have actually including rail travel. These are the ones that are purely done by train. Then we have a lot of other trips. In West Europe, we have over 45 trips that are done by land transportation. But the ones that are on the rail theme are basically trips that are done purely by train. And we have trips in China, in Vietnam with the Reunification Express. In Europe, of course, we have plenty of them, family trips, trips in Spain, in Italy. We have plenty of other options. And all of this product range that we put together, basically the base of this product was an external research that we made. And we basically we did a questionnaire to 2,800 customers, mainly from North America, Australia, UK, and Europe. And 75% of them, mentioned that they would love to travel in their next trip on a train trip. 87% of them didn't care if that trip was actually longer, as long as they could actually, enjoy the trip in a slower pace. So from our perspective, there is definitely an interest, and it's probably
the way where we should be looking at to go in the future.
I think it's worth actually, Valentine, just spelling out quite simply what are the benefits of rail travel to the traveller, to the destination, and to the company, to the actual companies themselves.
So there are a lot of benefits. Of course, we talk about the fact that rail travel is an eco travel. So this, I think that everyone is aware that you reduce by 20 times your carbon footprint. But not only this, taking the train is also very convenient and very comfortable. We were talking about flight just before this panel, saying that in the flight you have to keep sitting during all your flight, that you cannot move around. Also in the train, it's only, let's say, useful time. You can walk, you can read, you can do whatever you want. You don't have this hassle of security control, of getting to the airport, because in most of the case, train stations are in the city center are in the city center. So this is more, let's say, for leisure, but also for the companies. They have decarbonization objective, and definitely the train is the good alternative. In a lot of companies now, if you have an alternative by train for less than 5 hours, you have to take the train. I think that in the past it was much lower than that. So the companies are shifting to rail. Cost efficiency, this is something that we could discuss about, because we know that sometimes taking the train can be more expensive.
Yeah.
However, if you take into consideration all the costs, getting to the airport, then the time you will lose, the fact that you will have to buy your bottle of water, every single cost, at the end of the day, it can be a little bit more expensive, but not that much, and it depends again on the trains.
Yeah.
And for the destination, what is good also is that you can easily connect remote areas with the regional train. You can also reduce the congestion of the cities to reduce the traffic jam and everything. So a lot of benefits to me.
And I think one good illustration of what you're talking about is that I think I read an article recently where the trip from Madrid to Barcelona is about 19 euros, I think, if you're lucky, whereas that would be the same price as a cab to the airport, just even before you got to the plane. So, yeah, that's a good example of how it works. Now, Claire, you mentioned the availability issue. So just expand on that for me.
If I have to. No, it's an important point, and for example, come back to Switzerland. There's a reason I've stopped selling, and it's because I can't get enough tickets. I'm
sorry, I'm not the rail operator.
And there are plenty of places where availability limits our sale. Whereas if we have our own coaches, for example, then we can take them wherever we want, and it is a major inhibitor to our increasing our product availability. Added to that, rail travel, obviously, I don't want to ever do it in places where I also have to have the coach. So if I have to have people pick people up at the other side and be able to maneuver them around the cities, when I've got groups potentially of, we've got slightly different demographic between our two different tour operator companies, and I've got often older guests who aren't going to be able to maneuver their own luggage around, so I do need support for those kinds of things on most of our brands, not on all of our brands by any stretch. But I think that the countries where we have steady availability that we can get years in advance, because I go on sale 2 years before people are travelling, right? So I need the availability 2 years in advance, or at least understanding that I'm going to be able to get the availability 2 years in advance, and I need consistency of service, and then I'll be able to deliver. We were talking earlier about issues with flights, and that has become increasingly problematic compared to trains, for example. Trains are still running much more to schedule, and if there is a problem, then it's a half an hour difference rather than 12-day difference, no, a 12-hour difference or even more.
And Renfe give you a full discount if your train is 30 minutes or more late.
90.
90.
We just check it for the panel.
We were just sitting at the Heavy
But-
Data.
Okay.
But it's not coming from Renfe, but from the government.
Right.
So same for EU, for Ouigo, and this is what every government is now putting in place.
Yeah, which is why it's worth mentioning that France and Spain have got these rules now, whether if your journey is 2.5 hours, doable by train, then or under doable by train, then you should be taking the train. You have to take the train. Yeah.
Same in Spain.
Yeah. But let's go back to capacity, availability. What is the issue here? Because we need more infrastructure, we need more track, we need more lines. Is that happening? Maybe I should come to you about that. What's happening there?
So again, from our perspective, we normally do not really struggle that much with that because we do book in advance. The issue is when you have to book, as a customer, of course, when you have to book prior to the traveling date, that's when you can struggle into finding, obviously, availability for your trip. But what we do see is that even though there is government support, because of course initiatives like in France and in Spain, where the governments are motivating the travelers to take trains instead of flights, it's helping. I think there's also needs to be a little bit more of support on that infrastructure, on allowing more times for those trains, more options. A great example is what happened in Spain after the pandemic. So before Renfe used to be the main carrier in Spain, and after the pandemic we saw some other companies entering into the business, which helped quite a lot because at the same time that brought a bit of competition, healthy competition. So prices become more competitive. You had more options. You maybe do not need to go through Madrid to actually go from one place to the other one in Spain. Before, actually, that was the way, but that also motivated, and this is all from a very own personal opinion, no? This also motivated Renfe to implement more direct lines without going through Madrid. So this also benefits a lot the customers and the companies that use train travel as part of their packages and also for business travelers as well. So I feel there is a mixture of there needs to be support from the government in this type of limitations that they are implementing, as long as they are sustainable as well to the other businesses too. And with that, I think companies like obviously, TTC, myself, and other tour operators, we can actually promote more this type of opportunities that we can get from the train companies.
I mean, you're suggesting in a way that with more efficient use of the existing infrastructure and liberalisation as well of the market has actually meant that we can actually get more traffic on the trains even now. But where are good examples of where they are building more infrastructure, more rail track and all that kind of stuff, where is that happening? I mean, I come from the UK where HS2 has been one big disaster, 50 billion pounds, I think it was, spent on that, and then they split the line in two and didn't bother with the whole line. So it's only 100 kilometres now, 100 miles, which is kind of pointless. You're saving 20 minutes for half an hour for a very expensive line. So where is there potential, do you think, for more infrastructure, and which countries are supporting that?
So I have some figures about the investment, and what we see is that there are huge discrepancies between the different countries in Europe. You have good students and very, very bad students. The bad students are France and Spain. In France and Spain, in 2023, we invested 50 to 70 euro per resident. Whereas in Luxembourg, in Switzerland, they invested 500 euros per resident. So you can see the difference, and then you have the other countries, the other European countries in the middle. And where we have a lot of concerns, it's in Germany, where they invested around 100 euros per resident in 2023. And Germany, they are in middle of Europe, so if they don't invest, then the cross-border trains won't work. And we know that trains there are very late, and that we know that it will take 10 years so that the situation is all right. In France and Spain, it's a bit different because we invested in the past in the high-speed railway. So we could say that it's almost okay, that the investments are low. But we need to make sure that we have the right materials and that we continue to invest. Otherwise, there will be a huge gap between the demand and the offer that is available.
And going back to collaboration, again, that means between countries, they have to, you talk about up to the border, they're all very good, and then suddenly you get to cross-border and it doesn't work.
100%. See, we have a large majority of our tours are cross-border tours, but a very small percentage of them are cross-border rail tours. So most of our rail product is within a country because then we have a much more solid product offering than if we're looking cross borders. And in fact, the only real cross-border trains we do are ones, Eurostar. We do a lot of business on the Eurostar. We do a lot of business on one sort of way trains, rather than trains being the full tour. It'll just be to get you from one place to the other, and that's the only cross-border trains really that we do. But you say you've got a good student in Switzerland. I mean, yeah, they've got a great rail network, but that's where I can't get capacity, man. So I'm saying that while they're investing a lot in their rail, they're not coming close to the demand that exists in that country, and that their investment is because they expect it to be able to pay off on a serious level, and they're really pushing rail travel hard, both domestically and for their tourism market. So you can see that they're trying to shift the public onto the rail network. But if they're not keeping up the infrastructure, or if they're not getting the infrastructure to the level that can cope with the demand that they're trying to push onto the rail, then they're going to struggle. So yeah, you're 100% right though. If we could get infrastructure that would support cross-border trains better, there would definitely be the demand there to be able to meet that new infrastructure. Would be able to create product that would see guests travel around Europe more easily. Having said that, I work in a global role, and how good is Europe compared to the Americas?
Right, yeah. That's a good point. There are some very lovely romantic journeys in America, but they're very localized, and no, you're absolutely right. And countries that are doing well, though, we know this, China and Japan are very good.
I mean, we use a lot of, most of our tours in Japan are on rail, and they're done beautifully. That's done beautifully. Japan is a notoriously difficult country to work in tourism because they believe that there's one way, and that is the way that everyone has to do things, and don't care how your guests are. This is how every guest is treated. And so there's a whole set of other challenges in Japan, but it's not about the railways. The railways are the smooth part, typically speaking. Not all the time, but typically speaking, the railways are very smooth and beautifully high speed and very lovely to travel on. And guests, when they go to Japan, they get very excited about traveling on the train, and it becomes a real selling point of the destination. And it's one of the reasons it's our fastest growing destination by a long shot. We've got guests throwing themselves at Japan at the moment. We can't get enough capacity there either. It's wild, the number of guests going through Japan at the moment. Compared to the rest of Asia, frankly, it's grown exponentially over the past few years. I always know when I start doing a lot of work on a destination, started doing a lot of work on Japan about 7 years ago, and then I know when that work is paying off when my mum tells me that her and her friends are thinking of going. And about 4 years ago, mum's like, I think I want to go to Japan. I was like, nailed it. Excellent, we're doing okay, and then all of a sudden the whole world is going to Japan, and then but it's a beautiful place to travel by rail. You've got not only beautiful scenery, but very clean, comfortable trains and a very easy way to get around. And
you can get across the whole country.
Absolutely, you can get into almost everywhere you want to go. There's really good luggage services at the other side. There's really they're a good example of making rail travel beautiful. And one that Europe can learn from, frankly, with that regard. Yeah.
I am conscious, actually, by the way, we haven't had many questions, and I haven't really invited many questions, but if you have a question, I will save time. So just raise your hand, I'll notice you, and I'll bring you in whenever appropriate. So just please feel free to enter this conversation. I mentioned business travel. Now, business travel is a very different beast, as we said. How's that doing at the moment when it comes to rail pickup?
So the demand is very, very high for business travel. It's quite new for Rail Europe because in the past we used to sell only in the overseas countries. What we call overseas is outside of Europe. So there we were selling mostly for leisure purpose, and we recently started Europe region. And the demand for business travel is really, really high. Again, because of this decarbonization.
And it meets the company's criteria.
Exactly, and they have different needs. They need different features, different payment terms. So for us, it's kind of new product, different fares, different. So it's really different, even if at the end of the day our API is working. But definitely for business travel, the demand is amazing in Europe. Yeah.
And the companies buying up whole batches of tickets for their clients, and how does it work? Or are customers mostly buying them just individually?
No, usually you have intermediate companies. So usually the company, the travel agencies or the company, they work with what we call TMC for travel management company, who provide the travel agencies with an online booking tool. So that they can book their accommodation, their transportation, so everything.
Everything in one.
And then the TMC is also dealing with the expense and everything, so that any expense related to business travel will be managed by this TMC, so this intermediate. And then they connect to aggregators such as we are. And sometimes they are so big that they also sign agreements with the carrier by themselves. And you also have the GDS who are providing, Amadeus is there of course, who are providing the flight, rail content and everything.
And what about the ability to switch between providers? How smooth is that?
For the TMC?
No, switching back to just the normal customer. If I want to use one railway company for one bit of the trip and another one for another bit of the trip, how easy is that from your perspective?
So the thing is that there is competition. I disagree with you when you say that cross-border is not that easy, because it can be easy if you work with an aggregator. Because, of course, if you have in mind Renfe, if you have in mind SNCF, and if you have in mind Trenitalia, then it's very complicated because you will go to a website, then to another website, and you will compare everything, and it will be complicated. Working with an aggregator such as we are, then you just have to put your origin and destination, and you will be able then to easily compare the different alternatives. Not only for the price, but also for availability, for class of service, for services on board, so for everything, and timetable as well.
Let's change the word then. Maybe easy was the wrong word. For me, it's consistency. So I have, for example, in Switzerland, I know the trains are going to run on time, so I have consistency of service, and I know when I get on a train, my guest expects this, they get that, they get on the first train, it's the same quality as the second train. When we go cross-Euro trains, and then I guess get on one train and it runs perfectly on time, and that's excellent. Then they go to the next country and it's 4 hours delayed, and it's not as good a quality. The consistency of the trains is different. That's what brings our guests the challenge in terms of their expectation setting. It's much easier within a country to achieve that consistency.
And this is the big challenge when you have a connection between SBB in Switzerland and DB in Germany. And this is exactly the reason why we have concerns with German government, who is not investing that much in the railways, because German trains are always delayed. And this is very complicated to manage, because we know that SBB train, they are always on time.
Correct, and that's why for me it's not easy to book, easy to deliver. Okay.
One question I want to ask you, both you, Florencia, and you, Claire, which is, suppose, I mean, across Europe, for example, you've got very good motorways. If you had electric coaches, big electric coaches.
We're working towards it.
Yeah, now then. So that is actually an alternative to rail.
Yeah, it is.
And so tell me about that.
Oh yeah.
How is that doing?
Not as fast as I'd like, but we're certainly doing trials in a number of countries now. In working with HVO, working with electric vehicles in numerous places, and certainly a large percentage of our carbon fund is going towards, through the Treadright Foundation, is going towards investment in those areas and working with our partners to be able to improve the availability for the entire industry in those areas. And we've got new projects that are being rolled out over the next 12 months in both HVO and electric vehicles throughout, even in the UK, in Scotland, we've got some stuff going on. We've got in Italy and various other places where we've got huge volumes and the capacity to be able to invest in that in a meaningful way and then get some return on the investment down the track. And it's really important to us that we are shifting that. When we look at our carbon footprint, the bulk of our carbon footprint comes from our transportation and accommodation. We have a huge ability to influence our transportation in a meaningful way by improving our transportation. A little bit more challenging with accommodation, but the whole industry is moving towards renewables, so I can see that will become easier as more availability in renewables becomes normal. But certainly it's going to require investment from the big players to be able to shift in terms of transportation. So we're on a mission.
And what about for Intrepid customers who are, on the whole, quite principled and very eco-conscious? Would they adopt the electric coach idea?
I'm unsure. So we're definitely looking towards implementing using e-vehicles in our trips. However, I feel that the train travel, it's not only a means of transport, it's also about the entire journey. It sounds a bit cliche, but it's true. It's the entire journey of how you actually get to a destination. And for us, it's not only the transportation. It's, with train, you get to places, you are seeing places that you may not see with a bus or with a car, right? Because you're going maybe in between mountains or you have different landscapes. So I feel that the impression that you get from a destination is very different. And on the other side, for us, traveling by train is also has that factor of that understanding how the locals also travel, interacting with the local community, because we literally use public transportation that it's not really meant for only for tourists, but it's also used by by the local community. So these are situations and moments where we can actually allow our customers to interact with the locals. So yes, it's definitely a fantastic way and where we should all be going, and we are also doing our research and we are going to be implementing e-vehicles as well all across. But I feel the experience element that the train brings into the itinerary, I think very little things can actually replace that. Yeah. So we will have to see.
Obviously, probably many of us remember interrailing as students. It's a real rite of passage. It's a brilliant way of meeting other people, and it has so many side benefits too. The other factor we have to mention here, and if anybody has a question, raise their hand now. Frederick, okay. In fact, let's go to you first. I'll come back to my point. What were you going to say? A microphone for you. Hang on.
Don't worry, I have another one.
Thank you. One remarks first, before my question. One remarks. Very, very good session. Very good session on rail, and we definitely need to talk about rail next year for the next edition. Just for between ourselves. Very, very good session. My question is, firstly, do you work, Valentine, you work on a kind of IATA for rail, which will probably help the relationship between rail companies and probably also with governments? And the second question, this is nothing to do with this, is what about night train? Sorry, I have to ask a question. Do you have, Claire, do you have demand on you, Florencia? Do you have demands on that from your customers? And you, Valentine, do you have perspectives on night trains?
Okay,
that's all.
Let's just take that one at a time. The first one, the IATA of rail.
So IATA on rail. What I can say about standard on rail is much closer to NDC. And there is a standard which is called OSDM. And we are working on it so that our API becomes OSDM compliant, which will mean that it will be much easier than to implement our API. And this is this new standard in the rail industry. And this is something that everyone is expecting, and close to NDC, if it answers to your first question. Then your second question regarding Nightjet, definitely Nightjet are good. I cannot say that it's not. But the thing is that the demand is so high that there is no availability. This is what I was saying earlier. We recently signed with a new partner, and he said, okay, there is an issue with your API because I don't have OBB content. I don't understand. I don't have OBB content. I said, no, it's strange. I think you have OBB content. Okay, let's do a test. But you know, it's really difficult to find OBB trains. And yes, it took us, I think, 5 minutes to find a train. 5 minutes is very long. And finally, we could find one, and he said, okay, yes, it's working. But it's true that they are fully booked, and they need to invest. OBB needs to invest in the material. They need to refurbish the old material. Now there is European sleepers, but I think that you're all aware about Midnight Train. They finally couldn't be funded. It was a new rail operators for Nightjet. They wanted to offer luxury night trains, and finally they couldn't find the money for it. So it's a dream that's already started, but the demand is so high that we are not there.
We do use overnight trains in some locations for some brands, very specific brands. Youth travel, budget. The rest, until you get to luxury, Uber luxury. Obviously, you've got the Venice Implanori Express and that kind of level. So it's really ironic to me that you've got the very lowest of the low and the very highest of the high, and absolutely nothing in between, whereby I would be happy to put my guests on those trains. And the overnight trains are fabulous for us because it means you don't have the night accommodation and you're using the transportation form and you wake up in the destination. From a touring perspective, it provides an excellent alternative, but the options for us to be able to book those are limited, and the quality sketchy. So we use them in Egypt, for example. Our brave souls in Egypt are still on those overnight trains. But for Contiki, right? But then you look at Insight and Trafalgar, and they're still flying. Would I prefer us to be able to use a good quality overnight train? Absolutely, to avoid the flight. But we're still waiting.
As long as you've got straps for the bunks, you don't fall off. Yeah. What about you, from your experience? Intrepid?
So yeah, very similar to what Claire just said. For us, it's all about where we're actually offering that type of product. So for example, in Vietnam, we have this trip from north to south on the Reunification Express. So yes, sometimes you also have these night trains, and it's a wonderful way of actually reaching from one destination to the other one. Whereas maybe in Europe, we tend to try to stay overnight in the locations and, go a little bit in a slower pace. So it depends quite a lot on the destination. Yeah.
We've got to wrap it up here, but I've got to say one thing, which is that if all the arguments are for increased rail travel, for increased infrastructure, for increased capacity, take Europe, for example, surely this is something that the European Commission, the European Union should be supporting. And I personally don't know enough about what their investment is in this, but...
Look, from my perspective on exactly that point, it's one thing where tourism can help benefit the local population by bringing more volume in ways that mean meaningful connections for locals to be able to get more access to rail travel. And I think it's a perfect example of how tourism can be a force for good.
Yeah, and that networking and dispersal, we talked about that before, how smaller towns, newer destinations can get more custom if the train lines are available to them. Loads more we can talk about. The one thing I didn't even mention is if you get new infrastructure, there is going to be a carbon emission result of that in the short term, right? You're going to have massive, iron rail tracks, and the amount of labour and all that stuff is big. So it's an investment too, of a kind, and there are benefits and problems with that too. But let's see what happens, and we'll come back perhaps in a couple of years' time and discuss this again. See if there's been progress and you've got some more data for us to show that it really is happening. Can I please thank my panel to talk about rail?
Thank you. Thanks so much.